Welcome to the MindMuscleHQ Podcast, the fitness and wellness podcast, where we cut through the bull to help you build muscle, lose fat, become healthier and happier whilst keeping it real. With your hosts, Matt Adams, Tyler Clark, and Jamie Haywood.
Yes, MindMuscleHQ listeners, we are bringing you another awesome podcast today. Stay tuned for episode 17. We've got a special guest, James Perry, right here in our virtual Zoom studio. James is the global head judge for a relatively new up-and-coming Bodybuilding Fitness Federation, the Global Physique Organization, or GPO for short. And today we're going to be talking to James about bodybuilding and fitness judging in general. And we'll talk about a typical judging panel, what we'd expect from a judging panel, the numbers and the personnel in that panel, the processes on the day, methods and tools used. We'll look at what a judge is looking for through the various categories. We'll explore why judging is so important if that's not obvious enough. Then I'm hoping we can talk to James about his plans for judging at the GPO. Now, I happen to know a little bit about the GPO myself, being the co-founder and world and UK president. So that puts me in a position to talk a little bit about the GPO before we bring James onto the mic. So myself and my partner, Adrian Lupau, were previously involved in other federations and having experience of competing with other feds. And we could see big gaps in many areas where we felt we could areas which could be improved, and we decided to build a new federation, and that was when the GPO was born in 2019. An area in particular we felt could be improved across many feds was the judging, and we wanted to pick this up and ensure we had everything covered from the processes and the tools and the judging training and skill sets. Feedback to the athletes, being transparent and fair without bias or prejudice. That was a key factor for us, and we wanted to ensure quality and accuracy in the judge's ability, and we wanted consistency in results, and we wanted our athletes to have confidence that they were being judged fairly within the criteria for their respective categories. And another key factor, and where James comes in, was we wanted a global judging team that was autonomous and governed itself. So it couldn't be influenced by show promoters or sponsors and external influencers. And there we have it, I guess. I won't take up any more of the intro. And I'll introduce myself. I am Matt Adams. I'm the host today, and I am joined by my teammate, Tyler. How are you doing, Tyler?
Hey, Matt. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. We are actually a man down. You normally expect to have Jamie with us. He's not here today, so we shouldn't get interrupted too much.
Yeah, it might be a bit quieter than usual, this podcast, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. James might actually be able to speak without interruption. Okay, so without further ado, let's bring James on the mic. Hey, James, how you doing, my friend?
I'm very well. How are we doing?
Yeah, all good. Thanks for joining us today.
No problem.
This is an important podcast, I think, and I'm not aware of any other podcasts where they've had someone like you on and talk about judging. And so I think we might be this might be pioneering. It might be something new. That I'm sure that people have talked about judging before, but I don't think they've talked to it at this kind of level. So I'm really super excited about this one, and I know Tyler is being a competitor herself.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited about this. Yeah, for sure.
It's concerning, isn't it, that judging in general is very cloak and dagger in our sport. Whereas, you go to a football match, you know how it's scored, you know how they score a goal, you know how it wins. You go to the Olympic Games, you see all the athletic games that take place, you know how it's judged, you know how it's scored, you know how points are equated. Bodybuilding has to be one of the only elements that's got a subsidiary to a sportsmanship, where we release criterias, which are rules and stipulations, but nobody really discusses the scoring framework and how places are achieved.
Yeah, exactly. It is a taboo kind of subject, isn't it, really? And it shouldn't be, because I think that causes a lot of the problems. And it's good that we can be so frank and honest today and really kind of, it's not even expose is the wrong word. It's just literally talk about it honestly and openly, I think is probably the better way to, we're not scared to talk about it in this way. So before we dive in then, James, let's just talk about you a little bit. Give us a little bit of your background first before we get into any kind of judging discussion.
Okay, well, where are we now? 2022. About 10, 12 years ago, maybe longer, actually, I was your typical beer drinking kebabby in Friday, Saturday night, living for the weekend and crawling my way home party animal. I think really looking about what we know now in terms of mental health and things like that, I think looking at that now, if I put that knowledge to back then, I would certainly say at that point in my life, I had a definite mental health problem. You know, I would look in the mirror, almost bring myself to tears sometimes. I smashed several in the house until I decided enough was enough. And I knew absolutely nothing about bodybuilding, fitness, losing fat, losing weight, whatever your terminology is on that. I didn't even want to go into a gym. For somebody who's generally considered to have an intimidating persona, although not intentionally, I felt intimidated going into a gym. I didn't know what I was doing, what I was looking at. I actually remember I used to do a little circuit. It was 3 miles exactly. And I'd still wear jeans and a jacket so people didn't think that I was out trying to exercise. And I would do that 3 times a day, every day. And I think it was 8 months in total before I stepped in the gym. But I'd already gone from 16 stone to 10.
Wow.
Very dramatically, was very lacking in muscle tissue, was just very skinny. But I'd made a massive difference and my confidence started to grow dramatically. I felt fantastic. So I got into a gym, still not having a clue what I'd done, hired a personal trainer. That wasn't great. I mean, it was good for fitness sort of thing, but bouncing up and down on a Bosu ball wasn't really where I wanted to be. And then I started speaking to guys in the area, actually, in the area, names like, Tomo were quite synonymous with bodybuilding. I joined a gym called Muscle Power in Bletchley, and I started training and gaining muscle. And then I decided, from advice from others, I decided to attend a bodybuilding show, started attending shows, competed. Tried to compete, didn't go to plan, tried to compete again, competed a few more times, realized that the reality in competing with me was, as a bodybuilder, I weren't very good. It was just said, you just got to sometimes appreciate the fact that your skill set lies elsewhere.
How long did it take, James, for you to kind of come to that conclusion? How long were you in the process of bodybuilding and competing for?
And that was probably 4 to 5 years, really striving for that. But, it was a case of, how much, at this stage in my life, I'm already married. I've already got children. I've already got commitments that I had made before I had started on a quest to something which was wholly selfish, really. I mean, bodybuilding is a selfish sport. And it didn't fit in with our home life. But I love bodybuilding. I thoroughly enjoyed every bit of it. I remember the first show I ever went to, and there wasn't a minute that I was not entertained or inspired. It was brilliant. In fact, I remember sitting there watching this show, and a chap walked past me, and this shadow just cast over the top of me like the day had ended. And I turned around, and I'm in awe of the sheer shape and size of this monster of a man who's just come by the side of me. That bloke was Gary Lister, which you've all heard of. And then, you know, I became friends with another chap called Steve Johnson. I became friends with Maurice Felstead, Robert Woolley, all past the Watford gap, so to speak. And it just inspired. So I was trying to be like these guys. And as strong as I was getting, and as reasonable a physique as I could get, I had to sort of sit back and go, how far can I take this? How far am I willing to take this? And how far am I willing to sacrifice what I've already built in my home life? And then an opportunity came around with a judging course, which I attended, and I really, really enjoyed it. The thing is, in my day-to-day life, my job is assessing. I assess for a living. I'm a building control advisor. I'm a building engineer, structural warranty inspector. My job is to take designs, dissect them, and then inspect sites to make sure they're meeting regulation standards and compliance. This really is a skill set I've always had. And when I found judging, I thought, there's a connection here. I can do this. And not only could I do it, I was doing it really, really well. I was asking the questions that people didn't want to answer. But when I was judging, it was great. I enjoyed it. I was able to quantify what I was putting down on that sheet of paper, give appropriate feedback, as necessary. And my skill set in judging improved at a rate far, far faster than that of bodybuilding. Now, don't get me wrong, I still go to the gym 5-6 times a week to train. I still go out for a walk or a run every morning. I still eat like a bodybuilder. I still train hard and strong. I'm not a little lad by any stretch.
You've got them solid foundations there, haven't you?
Yeah, it's pretty much, I'm very old-fashioned in the sense of my training, because I took the lessons from old school guys that were, pick things up and put them down again, repeat process until you get larger and stronger. It really does work. But like I said, I found a passion in judging. But whilst I'm attending these shows and I'm gaining experience as a judge, I see contradiction everywhere, and every athlete I speak to, it's always the same issues or the same concerns, and it's easy to see why. And to refer back to what I said at the start of the show, how do they quantify this? How are people quantifying this? For the most part, in the majority of federations, we're told this is the criteria, this is what you're looking for, and how to assess the physique, top to bottom, left to right. These are your tools. This is how you break the physique down. And now those people on stage order them in 1st to 6th. That's opinion. And most people's criticism of the industry is that it's entirely opinionated. Now, we've got other opinionated sports in the world that are judged according to a scoring framework, so much so that they're featuring the Olympic Games, where they have an opinionated sport that's got a framework and scoring criteria put to the side of it. So if they can do it, why couldn't we do it in bodybuilding? So I began this quest of, why does nobody know how they scored, and why is nobody kicking off that they don't know why they're scored? Mm-hmm. And ultimately, that's what led us along this path. I continued judging, continued trying to implement my take on it to various federations. And then myself and Matt came into connection on a different federation. which was very, very short-winded. If I remember rightly, Matt really wasn't happy with the ethos of the federation going forward, which I respected. I think if you're going to cover a federated organization, you must have integrity. So that for me was like, right, okay, this guy he means business. So when we went on to the next stage and I was approached about that, I just thought, do you know what, this is an opportunity to implement something that's different. You know, I've never said to anybody that this is going to be the biggest, but I've told everybody this will be the best.
Yeah. I like that. And that's first and foremost, putting the athletes first.
Well, it absolutely is. You know, let's level. The average athlete takes between 14 and 20 weeks to prep for their first show of the season. During that 14 to 16 to 20 week preparation, they will spend £1,000 to £2,000 additional over the top of their normal cost of living, just on that diet and preparation for that show, including supplementation, performance enhancing drugs, TANs, trunks, posing practice, coaching, gym membership, additional gym memberships, because most people will take on another membership just so they can go in at 5 a.m. to do their cardio before work. It equates to a lot of cost. So if you think that if you've got 80 people competing on that show, there's 80 people that have invested, say, a minimum of £1,000 each to get onto your stage. There's £80,000 that people have invested to get onto your stage. I think that it is quite right that you give them every bit of time that you have, show them the respect that they deserve, and give them the scoring framework that they can work to, rather than just a standard set of rules that can be copied off the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, you shouldn't have to explain either. None of us should have to explain why we're trying to do things correctly or right. It's just that many, many years of it not being done as it should be means that we have to try to backstep and explain why we're doing things right. But that's the way it should be done, full stop. There shouldn't be any other way of doing it, and that's the way that I look at it.
I mean, there absolutely is. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, the thing with bodybuilding is there is always, you know, the person who is happiest is the person who comes first. Mm-hmm. You know, and there's a fine line here that you have to balance, because, you know, quite often people are unrealistic with where they're at or where they can go. You may very well see incredible potential in somebody, but they're just not there yet. And in their eyes, they're seeing it as now, and they want to know why and how, you know, they didn't get there. Ultimately, as the judge, you know, you can't judge their journey. You can't judge their transformation. You can't judge the reason why they're there. You can only judge what's in front of you. And the reason you can only judge what's in front of you is because that's fair and just to the competition and to every single athlete at the same time on that stage in front of you. You know, when I got into bodybuilding, social media wasn't as powerful as it is now. In fact, still relatively new. I think really looking back then, we had only just come out of the realms of MySpace and started into your Facebooks. So it was nowhere near as a powerful tool as it is now. And bodybuilders would turn up not having a clue who else was going to be on their stage or what anybody else looked like. They just turned up and got on with the gig, had a great time, met some new people. Now it's very, very different. We're coming into a different era of bodybuilding where, you know, people are putting up their posts with, you know, on the grind and, you know, these progress pictures, and progress pictures can be misleading as well. And, you know, nobody posts a bad picture. They can be very misleading, can lead the wrong way, but you'll often have an idea of who you're going to be stepping up on stage against. you know, you're judging your conditioning, your physique in a depleted state. And ultimately, you're not entering a dieting competition, you're entering a bodybuilding competition. So when you fill out, you know, you're going to have a very different appearance. And how you manage that filling out or carving up or fat loading or whatever your process is, you're going to have a different outcome, and you need to be looking at that. And this is where we see the difference between like your master's classes and your beginner classes, because your master's classes have done it that many times, they've got that nailed. It's every single bit. They know that by doing this amount of carbohydrate over this amount of times with this amount of water will lead to this result. Whereas some of the earlier guys are still learning that, and that's absolutely fine. In fact, I'd encourage that. It's, you know, learning your sport, you know, the art of bodybuilding is not the diet. It's not the training. It's not the food. It's how you present your physique on that day. You are training for a competition, you know, so you're training to present your physique for one opportunity. So once people realize that and they learn that process to go, right, this is what I need to come in at, you know, so, you know, I'll diet down and get ready. I'll be stage lean. And I'll quote that term, stage lean, 2-3 weeks out. And I'm going to eat into the show because I know with my body and how quickly I metabolize foods, I will flatten off and deplete. And I need to be bigger, fuller, harder, and lean and dry. You know, and that's the art of, that's the real skill set in bodybuilding, is bringing the, and it's the hardest part of it to achieve. Anybody can drop body fat. Anybody can put on muscle. How you can get the two of them and present what to you is your best, that's the true skill.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's very person dependent, isn't it? You have
Absolutely.
to almost, you know, figure out your own body. And as you said, that takes time.
It does, and practice. And of course, you know, you've always got that element of genetic potential and genetics in it. You know, I am very genetically unsymmetrical. You know, I carry a 17.25 inch bicep and an 18.5 to 19 inch calf. You know, it looks very odd on stage, but for love nor money, I cannot get my arms to grow like I can my lower legs. It's just,
everyone's got a weak point though, don't they? They all have a point where that's always lagging, or just struggle to balance that symmetry out.
Absolutely. We also have people that are incredibly skilled at bringing up loading body parts. One of the absolute joys of being a consistent judge, and by consistent I mean, you know, going around the circuit and seeing people, is you see people, like you might see somebody this year and then 2 years later see them and you remember them and they walk out and you're like, well done you. And that's magic. That is, I love to see people's progress.
Yeah, I can imagine that you will get a lot from seeing that, just seeing someone's dedication and hard work really paying off.
Yeah, no, it really does. I mean, I've judged several Battle of Bedford shows prior to it becoming a GPO federated show, and being a very, very popular local show, that was one where I often saw the same athlete season over season. And it is great to see their progress, especially when they've listened to feedback and gone away and really dug in deep to do that. You know, it shows a lot about the person. It shows a lot about their integrity. It shows a lot about their commitment to something. You know, yes, okay, ultimately on an amateur level, for many, it's a hobby. It is your sport. It is your pastime. But that doesn't detract away from what you've achieved there. Look, if you get into a position where you can get on stage and be judged alongside others with more experience than you, you've won. You know, you may not have won that day, but you have certainly progressed. And I think people need to pat themselves on the back a little bit more sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people nowadays as well are they're not as patient, and they kind of they'll be on stage one, maybe twice, and they're expecting to win. And you know, the whole stage thing it's an evolution, and you know, you shouldn't really be getting on stage with the expectation of winning. Albeit it does happen. You can get on stage and be outstanding, you know, for the first time. But there's a lot of false expectations nowadays. I do see people spitting the dummy out when it's the first or second time, and they're up against people that have been on and working for longer than them, and you know, they're really comparing themselves to someone that is better, but they just can't accept that, and that's a downfall.
No, they can't. In fact, I've actually had somebody's coach approach me after the show, a tad twaddled, but not very happy with the results, which ironically, the actual competitors were over the moon.
Yeah.
They were really, really happy. They were pleased. They were happy they got on stage. They were really happy with their feedback. You know, they knew they wasn't where they should have been. They were experienced. I think they've actually sacked that coach now. But yeah, you get all sorts. And I'm not going to lie, you know, I've done the same. I did the NABA Southeast one year. I was definitely outsized, without a shadow of a doubt. But other than the person who won, no one had my condition or proportions or balance. I felt I was a little bit sidelined. But, you know, at the end of the day, that's the result. You accept it, you walk away, you try to improve. Mm-hmm. I walked away and went for a massive barbecue meal at a restaurant.
I think we'll get on to some of the generic judging stuff in a minute, but I think what you just said there is, you know, it's an example of where you went to the Southeast show, but you know, if you could have gone to potentially a different show, or you might have got placed, and that's particularly one of the things that, you know, is wrong in the sport, is there's a lack of consistency. And you see athletes, and you know, it's not their fault. They want to try, they'll go from one show and not do it, and then they'll go to another show and they'll win, and then you get this inconsistency. And that might even be within the same federation. It's just a different panel of judges, and that consistency across the federation judging team isn't consistent, and they're not meeting the criteria, and that's something that we need to make sure within the GPO, that the results are consistent, and all the judges are looking with the same kind of eyes, understand the criteria. And if someone didn't do well at one show, if they were matched with similar levels of other competitors, then they wouldn't do well in this next show.
Actually, that's a very, very good point. So I had somebody query me recently. I handed out an invite to somebody on stage. They came second, and I didn't hand an invite to the winner.
Wow. What was the reason behind that?
Because the winner won, he was peaked. Yeah. There was no way he was getting any better, and what he had on him wasn't good enough for that show. There was no way he was going to improve on that. However, the person that came second missed out because he hadn't hit the nail on the head that day. But with 4 weeks to go to the international show, I thought, yeah, you're going to bring something. You
could see that. I like that. That's good because you can see the potential in him.
Yeah, well, you can see when they've just missed him. You got to bear in mind as well, some people use shows as a warm-up as well, knowing they're not going to win or not going to thingy, but they just want to, brush the cobwebs off, so to speak. So, why would you peak for your warm-up?
Mm-hmm. I mean, James, it's good that what you said in your intro was around, basically you weren't on the day, you gave the results to the best on the day. Now, the guy that came second had better potential, but he wasn't rewarded because he wasn't as good as the guy on the day. But like you said, you could recognize that in 4 weeks' time, his potential to be better Was
you
there?
just needed a touch more.
Yeah, but on the day, the right person won on the day, and that's what how it has to be.
Yeah, it does.
How did that next package turn out, James? How did you manage to...
It didn't turn up.
oh no.
Okay, so
but to be fair, you've got to appreciate as well, you know, there's been a bit of a bug flying around and people are a bit nervous about it. So
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's pick up on some of those generic type questions I talked about in the intro, and let's pick up on the basics of judging, and what does a typical judging panel look like? What are the processes on the day? That kind of thing. James, if you want to talk about that.
Okay, so processes on the day. Let's start from there. So with many classes, obviously everybody comes through and has their registration, and then we will have the judges meet or the athletes meet, just to go through with the athletes what is going to be expected of them. I try to aim this more at the bikini figure and wellness classes, because there's more variation across federations in those classes than there is in, say, bodybuilding, in terms of the criteria, i.e. Where you go to on stage, whether you're going to do an eye walk, a box walk, or whatever, just so they know what's coming. We then will do a pre-judge or a class check, if you will. What we absolutely do not want is for people to step on stage and have to be asked to move into a different class or not scored at all. The idea is, you know, we want to be there to give the athlete the best opportunity they can. And, you know, the reality is most people don't read that criteria enough to know exactly where they are. It's normally from an opinion of somebody in the gym or a coach that's made an assumption. But like I say, where you have something like PCA, which has 3 different figure classes, you know, taking that over to, say, GPO, where you've only got 1 figure class, you either hit it or you don't. We're not opening it up to everybody. You either fit in that class or you're going into a different one. So there's a lot of variation there. So what we don't want to do is get them on stage and go, they should have been in another class. So we try and do that beforehand. Now, that's not 100% guaranteed to get right. You know, I've seen people change dramatically. I don't know whether that was through feedback at the pre-judging, whereas I had a bikini lady that when she showed me her physique, it was like, you're very hard, like you're very, very lean for bikini. And the criteria really is not to have hard lines. But I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here, because if you move up a class, I think you're going to have like a battle on your hands. So I'm going to give you the option here to either change class or stay where you are. She decided to stay where she was, and I'm so glad she did, because when she came out and she was in her bikini and posing to the various mandatories and turns, she was the embodiment of bikini. So I was absolutely happy. And it's also critical that, you know, if you're wrong, put your hands up, say you're wrong. So we will do the check-ins and the pre-judging before we move on to the actual show. In terms of when you're on the show, very, very briefly, so we'll go through the quarter turns. Quarter turns are often not practiced as much as your mandatory poses in any class. Obviously with bikini and such, you don't have as many poses to perfect. It's more about your stage presence and your poise and how you transition from position to position. But where you have quarter turns, mandatory poses, pose downs, and routines, it's so important to practice those quarter turns, because I can tell you now, if you've got 10 federations are looking at those quarter turns to find their top 6. Mm-hmm. So it's incredibly important. So we'll go through their quarter turn rounds, and we're already taking notes here. And at this point, the judges can converse between themselves if they need to and ask to see other people or whatnot, or we'll move straight into comparisons. Comparisons will take as much time as we need. Really, to give them a fair run-in. If there's too many on the stage, we'll do it in groups. Often that can be confused as call outs, and that's not the case. We're just giving everybody a fair shot at that stage. And we'll go through their comparison. So once we've seen everybody, we will then go, okay, who wants to see who next to each other, is when we'll start moving people around. Yes, the general assumption in bodybuilding is that the first call out is your top placings. Quite often that is the case, but not always. So don't always rely on that as being clear cut that you've placed. Actually, I've seen people deflate on stage, which again goes back to I can only judge what's in front of me. And you've literally just changed in a matter of seconds. And then, of course, why we correlate that. So most federations...
James, just before you move on, it's probably worth saying that, there are circumstances where there is, I'll give an example. There's a clear winner who doesn't need to be compared, whilst second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth could all be very, very close.
This is often why you can't always count on the call-outs, because, like I say, you're being judged the second you walk past that curtain. Every judge has a different methodology of making their notes and assessing the physique as such. I use a line. So as the athlete numbers come out, so say we've got number one, I'll put number one down. As number two comes down, if my automatic reaction is that they're better than number one, two goes above one. And then third comes out, the same process goes in. So I'm already starting to place you with an opinionated score then. So yeah, that is, some people walk out and it's like, well, there you go, they've completely hammered it. In fact, I've seen somebody walk out on stage, hardly any tan, never been on the stage before, couldn't pose, was literally looking left to right to mimic those others. But to be honest, the guy could have just stood there and he'd have won. There was no denying. There was no denying it. It clearly had 25, 30 years of heavy training in the gym and eating right, and never bothered to get on stage before, and walked on, and well, there you go. There's your trophy. Yes. Sometimes it can be that clear cut until you get into professional ranks.
I think that's a really important point there, James. As a competitor myself, like, the moment you go on that stage, you need to be ready, you need to be prepared and on your A game, because it's actually at that moment you're being judged.
Yeah.
And then very first poses, I would say, would you say they're probably the most important, them first?
They are, yes, but, judges should be experienced enough to understand the physique will dry and harden through the posing. Mm-hmm. So you have to give them time on the stage as well. And there's also a lot of instances where, for example, there's always this question: do you want to walk on with your music, or do you want to go on stage and have your music played? How many times have you seen it where somebody's gone on stage waiting for their music and the wrong music's come on? Yeah, that automatically throws them up. So there has to be some tolerance there. You have to take consideration in, this is a balancing act as well as a strict framework.
I think it's important as well, when we get to that call out, I hear or see so many athletes moan because they may have been in the first call out and then didn't get placed. And it's important to kind of clarify that. And you've said that being called out first doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be first, and that is so important, because you could be trying to decide between a third and fourth place or fifth and sixth place. You might have already decided and have no doubt around the top three. So there's no need, if the judges have already made a decision on the top three, say as an example, you don't need to call the top three out for that comparison. You're only really trying to find the next places down. So sometimes, I see it so often. They'll say, "Yeah, I was in the first call out, and then but never got placed." And it's kind of like that's a criticism to the judges or somebody. It's a criticism to somebody, because they're clearly not understanding the process.
No, they're not. But also, you have to understand this is, everybody on that stage deserves to be there. Everybody paid a registration to be there. Everybody worked hard to get there. And regardless to whether first to sixth place is clear cut, I'm going to give everybody their time.
Yeah,
that's your moment on that stage, and I am not taking that away from you. Enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why everybody is coming up front at least once. At least once. So obviously onto mandatories a bit more. I was with the call out. When you're calling out certain people, I won't necessarily run through every single pose. Or my judges won't necessarily run for every single pose. Sometimes we'll ask you for a pose because we thought that you didn't quite do yourself justice, and give you another opportunity. But most of the time it really is a closer comparison to your standard comparison is how you need to consider a call out. Don't consider a call out a position, call it an opportunity to give them a better look at your physique. So don't mess that up. Get out there and give it everything. So we then go into routines. Now, most, if not all, barring a few federations in the world, and those few are generally promoted shows in terms of IFBB, the routines are just simply not scored, other than in a couples class. The routine is there for several reasons. The main reason being to give, and in truth, the main reason is to give judges the opportunity to collate the scoring. Not every federation does it this way around. So if you'll notice, you'll go to some federations and they'll do the routine first. When they do the routine first, you'll generally find that the athletes then go on stage and the next class comes on. The next class comes on and then goes off again after they've done their comparisons, mandatories, and routines, and the previous class will come back on to have their awards. Again, these judges still need time to collate those, so they're using that time wisely. They're just giving that routine the opportunity for the athletes to get at ease, have some fun, dry out a little bit more, get rid of the nerves before you're actually going into your comparisons. And there is some that will score against the routine. It's very, very difficult to do, to score against the routine, because none of us are choreography experts. We're looking at the presentation and how you feel your physique is best presented. Much the same in the classic class with a favorite pose. That is your chance to show what you see as the best way for you to present your physique away from the standard mandatories. So it is that as well. So, but like I said, I can't judge you on how good a choreographer you are. It really is just about the bodybuilding and the presentation.
It's the Tyler. It's the entertainment part of the show, isn't it? It's what the spectators want to see. If we didn't have those, then the shows would be extremely boring. And with modern social media things as well, you very rarely see quarter turns in a video, but it would be, we want to see routines. That's what people want to see. So that's still the entertaining part. And you might be the best choreographer and have the best routine, but still not win because you haven't got the best physique.
I'll give you a perfect example of that, actually. If you have a look at Jay Cutler, 2009, at the Mr. Olympia, the quarter turn to the right, everybody shares that picture, because it is the embodiment of perfection in bodybuilding terms, displayed in a quarter turn. That's how important they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find the actual routine of posing, both in males and females, it's a part where people can really express themselves as well, so they can add a bit of their own personality, the music choice, what they like. So I see that as an opportunity to be like, right, this is me, this is my moment, this is who I am. I've worked my ass off to get to this point. So at that point, I really do enjoy that routine, and it can be often like, oh, do you know what, this bit doesn't really matter, I'm not getting judged on this. Well, actually, you know, this is your time, this is your minute to really show off what you've learned. And you're right, you don't need to be the best choreographer. When a lot of us aren't dancers, originated from dance, but what you can do is hold the best poses, hit your stuff to your favorite music, and just really enjoy that time there.
Remember, that is, you know, you've come a long way to get to that stage. The intention through the entirety of your preparations was to get on stage in front of an audience and display your physique. That's your time. Enjoy it. Have fun. A show should be enjoyable. It shouldn't be nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
So James, carry on with the process.
So, okay. So once we've got to that point, we will then award. So we keep talking about criteria. I keep talking about scoring. So the general rule for bodybuilding judges is you place them. It really is that simple. And often the criticism of bodybuilding is that the placings are entirely opinionated. So it's very, very difficult to take something that, you know, it has to be opinionated to a degree. As much as a criteria will lead you to the ultimate for that class, it won't tell you how the judges will equate how you match that criteria. You're reliant on a panel of judges' opinion. So it's down to the head of judging, not necessarily the head judge, but the head of judging or the federation itself to distinguish that and how they do it. Most are quite content to publish a criteria with a set of rules and set of standards and physique aspirations, but none will tell you how they're going to score them other than the fact that you're just placed first to whatever. So let's break this down a bit, and I'll use bodybuilding because it's the simplest in terms of scoring. So you have 4 elements to score against. Mass, muscularity. So we're looking at mass development and size. Condition, body fat, dryness, grain, hardness, vascularity, definition. Shape, aesthetic features, athletic features, their X frame, Y frame, size of waist, gut distension, overall silhouette. Symmetry, proportions, even, consistent development, balanced condition, upper to lower body. This can often throw people out. Their legs won't be in the same condition as their upper body. That's purely down to oxidization of blood flow through your body and how you utilize your muscle. It's also a lot down to insulin sensitivity. You'll find most men will hold deposits of fat on their lower back and less so elsewhere. It really is just down to blood flow and oxidized blood flow going through that area. So we've got those 4 elements to look at. And as a judge, we know we're going to assess from toe to head, all the way front to back, left to right. We've got a set of tools we're looking at. But yes, ultimately we need to use those 4 elements to find who's the top and who's the bottom. And generally speaking, you will just write, okay, first, second, third. And as you go through the processes of quarter turns, comparisons, call outs, you'll change them and move them because people will show you more of their physique and you'll see better and better. I don't think that's good enough. So how can we take something that's almost entirely opinionated and lessen that opinionation and create a framework or a system that judges can all work to create a level of consistency? Well, the answer is quite clear to me, is let's hold the judges accountable. So you'd have recently heard, it's all going off in the boxing world at the moment over a recent fight where the judges awarded it entirely wrong, according to 150% of the population of boxing fans. And they're all calling for the judges to be held accountable. Tell us why you scored it that way. What are we missing? It's a very valuable point there, because they're right. Let's hold the judges accountable. So, judges, where did you put them? Well, how can they really do that other than a statement in some notes? I think they need a little bit more than that. So why don't we place them in each element of the criteria and then total those placings to create a score? And then the lowest score being the most amount of places to closer to first, the lowest score would be the winner, wouldn't it?
That makes so much sense, yeah.
But we can go a little bit further there, because now we need to avoid any bias, because there's always potential of bias, especially on the amateur circuit. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that? Well, okay, let's leave our panel of judges and we'll put a secretary at the end. And that secretary takes all of the judges' scores and puts them into another score sheet or another system, calculator, whatever you want to call it. And it takes the judges' scores across every athlete. So judge 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 have got athlete 1, that number, that number, that number, that number, and gives them a total score that all judges have put towards that athlete. So the total amount of places equates to points that all the judges have put that athlete. So you do that with every athlete. And then you can see that if any judge has got a score, say a total number across the judges have got a score of 114, say, as a random number, which is roughly the average. But then I've got this one judge that's got 180 and this other judge that's got 95. Mm-hmm. Well, let's remove those. Just take them out of the equation. I'll remove judge 1 and judge 7 and leave me with 5 judges. That leaves me with an average. Now, let's see where the figures are then, because that's given me a more consistent playing field and removed any potential bias. That removal gives us our result.
So there's an actual framework behind the judging?
Absolutely. Well, it is with GPO.
Yeah.
And this is the difference. I'm not afraid to show people how this works. I'm not afraid to have it criticized either. It's more work for the judges. It is more work, and I'm holding those judges accountable, because after that show, all those scorecards are taken back, and I sit down and I go through every single scorecard. Now, I'm not looking to start pointing my finger at people and say, that isn't good enough, that isn't thingy. But it gives me the opportunity to say, right, okay, we struggled here. What's up? What do we need to go over anything? Or it might highlight an issue in the system itself. Mm-hmm. So it's an audit. So we take that, we create an audit, we review it, we go again. We take it again, we create that audit, we go and review it, we find weaknesses, we make them better, we implement them, we go again. It's consistently an evolution of this scoring system. It's not about what's right and wrong. It's about what's right for the athlete, and it's about holding the judges accountable. This is also why it's very important to understand here. I will not allow judges to give feedback individually. So an athlete is, sorry?
What would be the reason for that, James?
The reason for that is you are being judged and scored and placed according to a panel. So your feedback should come from a unification of that panel. So let's say you were the athlete, you didn't place quite where you wanted to, but I want some constructive criticism, I want some feedback. And that judge is just going to grab a drink, I'm going to grab him quickly. Do you mind just giving me some pointers where I was at? Yes, of course, no problem. So you've got some feedback off of him. Meanwhile, what's actually happened is the way our system works, because his scores were so far out, I removed him. You've just got feedback off of a judge that didn't hit the mark.
Yeah.
It's not ideal. These athletes are committing so much to step on your stage. Give them what they deserve. You're not big enough. You're not conditioned enough. That's not enough. That's not constructive criticism. You can get that on Facebook. Mm-hmm. Something they can work at, something they can chew on, go away, work on it, come back better.
And improve, yeah.
To clarify that scenario or go over that in a little bit more detail, what the listeners might not have got from that is that, at one show, a panel of judges may have done it fairly. Let's keep everything like fair and honest, as if everybody's doing it fair and honest for now. But one of the judges might have just, like James said, got it wrong. They didn't understand the category or the rules and criteria. And then what would happen there is James would see that because he's analysing the results. It'd come up as one of the judges didn't perform well in that criteria. And then like James said, he pull that person aside. It's not on the day. We have training days and things like that where we'll it might be the more than one judge got that criteria wrong, and that's what James is saying around an issue. It might be the wellness. Let's pick the wellness because it's a relatively new category. The judging was all over the shop. 7 judges kind of got it all different. One got number one first and one got number one last, and that would be a clear indication that the system was wrong, that the training was wrong. And so the outcomes from that is over time that the judges are getting trained, they're getting told where they went wrong, they're allowing improvement and becoming better judges. We're not having a celebrity judge or someone who's been a bodybuilder but never been told how to judge before turn up on the day. I've judged a few shows myself and literally just say, can you judge today? And I'll go, yeah, okay, what's the criteria, and never get that information, and then I'm judging. And then they'll give me a piece of paper and say, just pick your top 3. I'm like,
that's not right.
Oh, I know it isn't, James. We know that's not right, but
that's the problem, isn't it?
That's what happens. And that's not fair judging, because I don't understand the criteria. I'm literally, it's opinionated. I'm picking my top 3 who I like. I am a coach as well, so one of those athletes could have been mine. And I see this so often, and this is what a lot of the athletes see, but without the evidence, is that they clearly weren't placed where they should have been. But the system that James is talking about is, you are going to be judged fairly. And that means that, if you're well known, you're well liked, you're popular, or you're influential, it means that you might get upset because you didn't get placed where you expected to get placed. You got placed where you should have been placed. And we're not out there to please people in the sense of giving them a result that they expected. We're there to please people for rewarding them for the right result. So that's key. The main point I wanted to mention was around the evolution and the skill set of the judges is constantly kind of, reviewed, and the judges are upskilled every time. And if there is someone that's just not competent as a judge, and it does happen, you get people that are very passionate about the sport, love the sport, but they're just not good judges. Most federations don't have the balls to say, listen, mate, you can't do, you're no good. So we would rule people out if we give them a fair chance. We keep training them. If they keep getting it wrong, they'd have to go.
We give them the opportunity and the tools to do it. Yeah. But much like I alluded to earlier on, that I'm not a good bodybuilder, but I'm a good judge. Mm-hmm. Not every bodybuilder can judge. Mm. I see so many bodybuilders that will get asked if they can judge this show, and they're useless. Like, they just couldn't do it, and they won't be held accountable either. I mean, Matt alluded to the point here about these pseudo celebrity judges. You know, this isn't the X Factor.
Yeah.
You know, this is a bodybuilding show. I don't care if you're an industry expert on drug use. I don't care if you're an industry winner or champion. What I care about is how you take apart a physique that you can judge professionally, fairly, say what you see, what's directly in front of you, and be accountable for that decision. You know, if you're asked, why did you place that person there? Oh, because I didn't have anywhere else to fit them in. Or, well, actually, why I put them there is because this person demonstrated symmetry in this area. I looked at their proportions from front to back. Their posing presentation was fantastic. You know, they really demonstrated this, that, and the other. But however, for third and second were superior in these elements. That's justification.
That to me is how I would want my physique to be judged. I really don't think it's fair for any athlete to be judged on like the following maybe on social media across, you know, who they maybe know and who they don't, because every athlete on that stage puts in the same amount of effort, the same amount of work to train, to build, to stay on that nutrition plan for sometimes 20 weeks or even more. So what you need to be judged in is actually what you were saying, your physique on that day, the symmetries, you know, the proportions, the condition. There's no need to overcomplicate it. It's just that simple. And I think to overcomplicate that, it just doesn't make sense. And it's just keeping the eyes on what's in front of you at the stage, isn't it?
No, absolutely. You're absolutely bang on. And the problem with people that have not had any sort of professional development or training or continued professional development within judging alone is you often get a conflict of terminology. So I've actually had somebody turn around to me and said, well, I thought their balance was fantastic, but their symmetry was off. Excuse me? What? You just completely contradicted yourself. How can their balance be on point and their symmetry be on? It's what? That makes absolutely no sense. It's the same thing. In fact, so I actually define balance openly to my judges. So we got these buzzwords flying around all the time. As I alluded to before, in bodybuilding, we have 4 elements: mass, condition, shape, symmetry. If you nail it on all 4 of those, what's that? That's balance. That's a balanced physique. You got the mass, you got the condition, you got the symmetry, you got the shape. That's the balance. Don't confuse the two. And that happens a lot. So for me to say, yes, you can judge because you talk the talk, it's not fair to the people that are stepping on stage.
Yeah.
I think it's worth pointing out as well that, you know, in any other sport, you have to have some level of experience to be a judge. You have to understand exactly the rules or the criteria and be an expert almost in that sport. Now, this is where the bodybuilding world, and it, you know, without trying to criticize people, I'm not, my intention is not to criticize, it's just an observation. You know, and a lot of promoters and things struggle to get the numbers in, and it's not you know, a multi-million pound industry where, you know, you can pay top judges and things, you know, and a lot of judges don't get a penny. They literally don't even get their they're doing that out of the love of the sport themselves. So you know, it's not a criticism to these judges either, or these individuals. It's a point where the athletes need to understand that that's where it breaks down. That's where it's wrong. You know, if there was multi-million pounds in there, then potentially you could have more and more judging schools and training and things like that. But the reality is, you'll often struggle to get people passionate enough to turn up for free and spend a whole day plus travel, sometimes overnight, to do it. So you kind of literally, sometimes as a promoter, you're like, shit, the 3 people drop out the day before, and you've got to ask you've got to find someone like your nan. Will she judge? Or, it's basically, oh my God, who's the person that can judge? And that happens.
All the time.
Yeah. So there's a certain amount of sympathy there as well to federations, show promoters. It isn't easy because that money isn't there to pay judges. But at the minute, in the GPO, we are lucky to have the guidance. We've set a framework. We've set up this academy, judging academy, where we're trying to bring people in and train them up on how to be a GPO judge. And that doesn't cost anything. And that's fairly cheap to do. So there's no reason why other federations can't take our lead and do that as well.
No, exactly. And, I'm not pointing fingers here and saying that what you're doing is wrong. I'm just saying that what we're doing is different.
Yeah.
I like to think that somebody somewhere would turn around and go, do you know what? That actually does represent the athlete. Let's give that a go. It's not, it's bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is a single discipline, but competitive bodybuilding is multidiscipline now because we have so many variations in between the federations. It is a multidiscipline sport. But people are losing their trust in a lot of things because things are so blatantly corrupt. And I don't want to name any names or name anything in particular, but when you see a post that is from a federation that is marketing a particular coach, for example, I don't think that gives confidence to your competitors. Now, they will still come to your show because ultimately your show is backed by a massive corporate machine. So they'll get the glitz and the glamour and it's fun and it's great. But are they being judged fair? Are they being given what they truly deserve? We can all throw a few fancy lights and a flashy showboard behind them. It's about that integrity. I'd rather strip back. I would rather see a show stripped right back to its bare bones in a beer smelling working man's club like they were 20 years ago, if I can provide fair, accurate and transparent judging against the glitz and the glamour of a giant stage at the NEC and your picture posted across social media. That's
bodybuilding to the bone.
I think it is. Hopefully, when we talk about the future and what's happening down the line, we'll talk about how we can be more transparent, some of the tools potentially that are in the pipeline and things like that, and methods that we're using, because again, that dishonesty, again, without trying to criticize people, I've been a judge and my athletes have been on stage before. I've had to judge them, and I've said to them prior to me going on stage, I will judge you how I see you. If I think you're last, you'll get placed last. Now, that's an honest conversation I have with my athletes prior to that. And that only happens when I'm in an international stage. I mean, it won't happen again now because James won't allow that to happen. And I'm no longer on the panel of judges either. But when we first started the federation and other federations that I belong to, I was kind of the UK lead and things like that. I had to take teams of UK and judge for the UK. And that does happen at international shows. But I guess the point I'm trying to say is even with honesty and integrity, sometimes it's hard because it's to remove bias, because you're more inclined to keep looking at your client than the other client, and so they've already got a bias automatically anyway. It's very, very hard to do that. I do believe that I try to be as honest as possible when I've done that in the past, but it is difficult. But
it is. But I think that's where you go. Sometimes you've got to be very clear cut and just say, right, well, I can't 100% guarantee you that bias is removed, So I'm going to remove the risk of bias, and you are not judging.
Yeah.
There you go. That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are as well, like you said, there are very obvious signs of where it is corrupt, and there are corrupt judges. And when you haven't got a system in place that can identify it, and where you're not transparent and open, and again, it's no fault of the show promoter or the federation, because they haven't got the system in place. It'll allow a celebrity judge or someone the last minute they have to get in to do it, to place one of their athletes. And then, the flack comes down further the line to the federation and the show promoter, because of the, the corruptness in that one judge that was a part-time judge, or first time or only time judge. And so, those weaknesses are there in the bodybuilding kind of circuit at the minute. But from a GPO perspective, the process that is in place there, if it was ever to happen, and it's unlikely to happen, because our judges are all gone through the process, and they're all skilled, and they're all trained and marked and assessed. If one of them didn't, it goes down to like similarities to if they didn't score well. If they were biased, and their bias picked up, they'd done it on purpose, that would highlight and show up, because it would be different to the other judges' results, and so it would stick out as an anomaly, and then the formula would hopefully remove that result, and then they would be picked up afterwards. And then if there was any kind of suggestion that it was done because it was their athlete, or it was connected or something, then they would definitely be removed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's the only way we can build trust.
Yeah, and that was, when I talked about having the judging team, so to speak, or as a autonomous kind of group within the federation, I think it's important that James owns that. I don't influence him in any shape or form when it's to do with judging. We link up with federation issues and the future, but anything judging, James is the owner of it. I have no influence over that, and nobody else does, apart from the internal team, his team of judges. It's a closed box, so that's what is important for us to set up that security around the judges.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, for example, we're currently discussing a scoring framework to implement a disability class. We all agreed that it was important to include a disability class because we should be open to all. But then when you sit back and go, right, I need to apply the same ethics into that class as the others, you start to realize how difficult disability bodybuilding is to assess. So it's not hugely popular in terms of numbers that apply. It's unusual that you'll get like more than 3 or 4 people compete. And you've got a good range there. You will have somebody who's ambulant, somebody who's not. And how do I judge those two where they're so very different? And we're currently going in with an open mind between the circle of judges and saying, right, okay, what do you think? Because everybody's opinion has to come in before we get into somewhere. Now, we are actually looking at an Olympic style scoring, or a Paralympic style scoring system, where it's we'll reverse it on its head. So the Paralympics do a point deduction for an ambulant part. So, for example, they would deduct a set of points from, say, a leg being missing, and award that elsewhere. So to try and even up the playing field. So somebody might start on -7 while somebody starts on 0 to get that. But how to implement that scenario into bodybuilding? Because firstly, we have to reverse it on its head and say that would be a plus. Because the negative numbers are our rewarding numbers. So yeah, we're going through quite a bit of that, but we're just taking on an industry expert in disability who's very, 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 very keen on getting this going. So, and we're not going to release it until we're confident that it's right.
Yeah. Okay,
so James, as what happens with most guests, we touch the surface and always, run out of time, and always probably could have a second podcast, because I'm pretty certain we could talk a lot more. We've gone over the hour, but if we can just touch on maybe, I mean, I know Tyler, you had a couple of questions which are probably worth bringing up. Do you want to? Can you remember those? Do you want to bring those up now?
Yeah, I'll go through these with you, James. These were some that I actually had. So one of them is what separates kind of the winners from, what separates people from placing first, second, third and fourth to not placing at all? Is it quite a big difference? Is it very small tweaks in kind of the physique and the overall look? Like what is the judge ultimately kind of looking for as a package?
James, before you answer that, you could use the example that you used in part of my training that we done, and that was with Phil Heath and
yeah. It's the breaking down of the physique. So ultimately we're just looking at the physique here. There's various classes there. You've got other elements that are additional to the physique, like, for example, skin tone, complexion, whatever else, but then not as heavily weighted as the actual criteria elements of it. I think what you've got here, I've seen somebody with the most amazing physique present it incredibly poorly. It's really nailing all of the areas. And it's getting away from the fan base sort of thing. So what Matt, I think, was touching on when I did Matt's training and stuff like that, I use a rear double bicep shot of Kai Green and Phil Heath. And I do this for a particular reason, because generally 9 times out of 10, people are either Camp Kai or Camp Heath. Yeah, there's never really a crossover. Kai Green should have won. Kai Green should have won. Phil's bloated. Da, 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 da. Yeah. Now, if I took those two back shots and showed you to look at, right, okay, they're both performing a rear double bicep. Let's look at their symmetry, for example, and their condition from upper to lower. So if I looked at that rear shot and I took their peak of bicep to tricep, the front deltoid to rear deltoid on a rotated cap, their width of neck, and the size of calf. And if you did the same thing on the two athletes, you'll start to go, oh, hang on, there's differences here. You'll see that Phil Heath is far more in line and the same sort of dimensions than Kai Green. So hang on, let's break this down a little bit further and start to look at their symmetry in terms of balance conditioning. Let's look at the lower back of Kai Green. It's got a very deep Christmas tree shaped lower lat, but there's no real demonstration of striation there, where the lower body is heavily striated and very, very lean. And then Phil's is the same condition in that lower back area to the leg area. So ultimately, again, you've looked at Slank in a very finer detail, and suddenly you've seen a clear division. They've clearly spotted a difference, if you start to then decide, right, okay, well, let's take that and look at the shape of the two. So hang on a minute. So from the width of the lat to the size of the waist and the length of the torso, to then how we fan out again for the outer quad, and then come back in with the curvature of the calf to raised heel at the back, we can see this wonderful X frame coming in. So let's look at the next shape. Has it got those same proportions and sizing as the person next to him? Oh, hang on, now I'm suddenly seeing the difference. I've got more of a flare on the lat, but also what I've got here is a greater depth showing me thickness. So as I assess that shape a little bit further down, so I've already now assessed he's got more muscle in that area because he's got a greater depth. And as we follow that down and we're still looking at the shape, well, hang on a minute, so that waist isn't as tight there. So maybe this is awarded the other way. And we come back down. Oh, hang on a minute, we're starting to gain a better shape again as we come to the outer side of the squat. We really are micronizing how we're breaking down that physique to that degree. Mm-hmm. And it's using those two people is a perfect example, because normally people will go, well, that's a clear winner. That's a clear winner. Well, when you actually break it down, you'll see why Phil won every time.
Yeah, and I guess that's not always the case, because when I'm at bodybuilding competitions, I'll look and you can kind of sometimes see, maybe top 4 or 5, but between them, the differences in the physique is very minimal, and I suppose that's where it comes to attention of the detail and breaking down.
Yeah, it does. It really, really does. But to very, very briefly give you a straight up answer onto your original question, confidence.
On stage.
Confidence. If you are stage confident and you come out there, not cocky,
humble,
you have fun and enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
But confident. Be confident that when you pose without a mirror, you are posing to the same standard. Be confident of your physique and your shape and your condition and the package you're bringing to the stage, because that confidence shows itself in how you present your physique.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is the best example of that, isn't he? If you look at comparison pictures, he's definitely not the best comparison pictures on stage. But he even admitted himself, and that was part of the reason why he used to psych people out backstage, is to make them less confident on stage.
Yeah,
it's because his posing ability and his confidence was way above everybody else's. And he often used to say he'd see people with better physiques than himself backstage. He'd slag them out, and then they were withering wrecks on stage. And he was so confident on stage, and that's how Arnold won a lot of the shows, just purely through mastermind and confidence. But
this was a perfect trait of Dorian Yates as well. It's how he got the nickname of the Shadow, because you always almost felt the shadow when he was behind you. He came in like nobody had seen him. Nobody saw him train. Nobody saw him diet and prep. He turned up and scared the living daylights out of everybody, to the point of going, what is this that's just walked in?
Yeah, with no smile on his face either.
Yeah. Walked out there. As soon as the music hit, I mean, if you remember some of those Grand Prix performances he did with the sort of trance music in the back, like boom, 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 as he that's pure stage confidence.
Yeah.
He knew he had the game. He knew he had done the work. He knew he was coming in like something the world had never really seen before. It was really special. And that level of confidence is very difficult to beat. And genetics.
Okay, Tyler, next question.
So another question here is, any exciting plans for the actual federation going into this year? I know it's quite a new federation, so just really what the plans are for this year.
Okay, so yeah, there are exciting plans. So this year is a big year for us in terms of GPO UK. We've got more shows than we've ever had in one country alone than before, which is fantastic. We've got an incredibly enhanced amount of media coverage, and we're really pushing into that. Thanks to UK Beef TV, UK Beef Magazine, promoting most of that side of it. But we've got a few things coming in the pipeline. I mean, we've mentioned again and again and again about open transparency. Well, we want to make that open transparency a bit more transparent. We're trying to work towards live publishing of the scores at the show. We're currently working alongside a company called Whoosh, we're at the beta stages of developing a judging app for the phone. So the judges will be sat there. So they're trying to actually take my formulas that I've put together on Excel sheets to create the scoring system, and they're turning that into an algorithm within an app. So the judges will be sat there with like a tablet, and it will let them score via the application, which will all go across to the head judge. And then the head judge will agree on feedback and whatever else. Once they're happy with it, they can publish it, and the final scores will be displayed. We're also looking at a background commentary, which is currently being looked at and worked on with some pretty cool names in the industry. And again, we've got the potential for growth in those two elements, that we could have that commentary that people can go back to, but also show those scores on there as well. So we're trying to also bring it in so that people can come, when they come into the show, they can download this app themselves as well, you know, and give the audience something to do or something to see. You know, I like to think that where we're going with this is that we can eventually get to a point that where people in the audience are actually going to judge as well. Not that their scores will correlate, but their scores will correlate to being awarded a people's champion.
Yeah.
How fun would that be?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So there's lots in the pipeline.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. And just the final question here is what, I think we actually covered on this one quite a lot, actually, what the judges are looking for in the athletes. And that was a lot on the framework that you were using through the judging process.
This varies greatly.
Males and females as well.
It varies greatly in class. I'm going to use classic for an example here, because it's probably one of the most debated classes. Near on 99.9% of federations worldwide use a ratio to classify somebody as classic, barring one or two who choose to say somebody has a classic look. A classic look is a byproduct of the ratio. The idea of the classic class is to eliminate mass as the overriding factor in bodybuilding. So where are we to? It's still an important matter. It's still a bodybuilding show. It's about how much muscle you've got, yes. But if everybody on the stage has a similar amount of muscle to their frame, then you're kind of taking away mass from that criterial element whilst simultaneously keeping it in and focusing more on the shape and aesthetic of the athlete. So how their proportions work in their shape. That leaves you with that classic look. So it becomes a byproduct of the ratio. But rather than giving people the opportunity, or giving federations or promoters the opportunity to use classic as an overspill class, you know, you go with the ratio. So you might have somebody who's 2 foot taller than the person next to them, but ultimately with their height to weight within a 15% margin of the both of them, they're both sat within a 15% margin. Therefore, the amount of mass they're carrying is comparable to their frame. So therefore, that structure and that structure have percentage-wise a similar amount of muscle. So we can focus more on their aesthetic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I find classic a really tough one to figure out myself personally. Mm-hmm.
It's very, very confused in a lot of times. Everybody wants to say that they've got a classic look. I'm not going to name any names here, and I'm going to be very quick when I say this because I'm obviously concerned about time, but I had some feedback. I awarded a first place at a particular show to a competitor in bodybuilding. He just happened to meet the height to weight ratio for classic, and do you know what? You're there, why not? There's nothing against it, you're not breaking any rules. but you are going to be judged according to the classic criteria. So he entered the classic criteria and he didn't win. He said, I don't understand. So, well, what do you mean you don't understand? What bit don't you get? He said, well, you know, he said, because I came first in the bodybuilding. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right. You were judged across 4 elements of the criteria in the bodybuilding, where mass has the same level of weight as every other element. And where in classic, we eliminated the mass as an overriding factor, and you were judged purely on your aesthetic, your presentation, and your condition. In comparison to the people that you were competing against, you were not the best.
Yeah.
It can be very confused.
Yeah, because it's a different look altogether, isn't it?
Mm. Imagine if you'd have won in both.
That wouldn't be possible.
Well, you would hope not. You would hope not.
The only time that would be possible is if the standard in either both or one of the categories was absolutely dreadful, and you know that can happen in amateur classes where the standard is bad, but you know, where the standard is high, that should never happen. Mm-hmm. Okay, James, that was really good. I mean, before we just say goodbye and end, I know that there aren't any hardline dates, but what kind of plans or opportunities are there for anyone who wants to kind of maybe become a judge or learn how to become a judge?
So I'm going to hold my hands up here a bit. I'm behind schedule, but I am trying to pull that back around. So in the background, I've been working on a proficiency course that can be a presentation as such. So I can better display and guide through. Now, I do training courses with people on a 1-to-1 basis or a 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1 basis in smaller groups, where it's much easier and closer knit. But I want to expand on that. I want to give athletes and coaches the opportunity to do a judge's course so they can go away going, do you know what? I know exactly what I need to do, you know. So the intention is to combine judging proficiency and push that forward to create a judges academy, where the academy will award judges their initial qualification, which will entitle them to judge across any GPO panel in the world, whether that be the Netherlands, Italy, Romania, Spain, because they're all the same. Every judge over there goes through the same system as we do. The only real difference in what they do abroad is the running orders. So, for example, if you go to compete at the Battle of Den Helder, you've got no choice but to stay at the show all day because the awards are at the end of the show. But yeah, as we expand on that proficiency course, this will become more of a thing that the public can buy into. So you can come along with no intention of becoming a judge and do a full judging proficiency course. The only thing you don't need to do is have an assessment at a show. So with judges to become a judge with the GPO, they would have their training and then they would do 1, 2, even 3 or 4 assessments at a show, judging the show, but where their scores are not correlated. So I will correlate everybody's scores and then I will do my normal audit and scenario, but then I'll take those judges' scores and compare them with the others and see where they're going wrong or if they're not going wrong at all and it's going very, very right. And that's how they get awarded their accreditation. The only other federation I know that is so normally intent on training and qualification is NABA, which is we're taking a different approach, a more modern approach, I think. But yeah, we're going to open it up to the public, so anyone can join.
Excellent. Okay, so let's call it a day there. It's actually flown by, and I'm not sure how long we've been on for, but it's definitely longer than an hour. So
sorry.
I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I did as well. I think it's useful and definitely information that a lot of people probably have just not heard before. You know, like you said when we started this about it being taboo, it shouldn't be. And what we will do is we will put James's contact details on the show notes. So that if you do have any further questions, then I'm pretty certain that James won't mind answering those questions in his own time. He is a busy man, so don't expect a response immediately. He will get round to doing that when he can. But yeah, James, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thanks very much.
Okay, listeners, next week we have Chris from the Blood Labs joining us, and we're going to be talking about what the Blood Labs do, the importance of having your bloods taken as an athlete, and not necessarily as an athlete, as anybody who wants to improve their health. My mum is actually going to the Blood Labs on Saturday to get her bloods taken, mainly because she doesn't trust the GP service, but that's another story. Okay, so thanks for listening, and we'll catch up with you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the MindMuscleHQ podcast. Please subscribe and share, and don't forget to tune in next week for more.